Okay, great. I'm just going to wait for a second for people to dial in. I see a lot of people going live right now. So I'm just going to wait for a couple of seconds before everyone comes on board. Great. So we already have 80 plus people who are attending the session live right now, and the number is increasing every second. So let's get started. Uh, so warm welcome to all of you who are joining us live today. The number of people who are joining in clearly shows the interest in Canada as an MBA destination. So let me welcome our today's guests. So John Derek Clark, fondly also called as JD, who is the Executive Director, Recruitment and Admissions at the Ivey Business School, University of Western Ontario. We also have Danielle Spence joining us. She's the Assistant Director, Recruitment and Admissions for the full-time MBA program at University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. So basically the top two, or amongst the top two MBA programs in Canada. In today's session, we'll be discussing quite a few interesting topics, right from employment and immigration opportunities in Canada to the two highly prestigious MBA programs, which JD and Daniel represent. And we'll also talk about how you can build a strong application to these programs and possibly see yourself in one of the MBA programs by next year. So stay tuned for this whole session. There are going to be quite a few useful tips coming your way, and we will talk about a lot of different things during the course of the next 60 to 75 minutes. So JD, starting with you, you have a lot of experience in the recruitment industry for B schools. You have over 20 years in the industry, and you must have seen the industry change, the landscape evolve quite a bit. Can you talk a little about what is making Canada such an interesting destination for an MBA? Why is so much interest coming your way from India?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Sanjay, for running this session, and thank you for everyone for joining us today. I think a couple of things that I'll talk about is the first thing is that part of an economic policy in Canada is a heavy reliance on immigration, and particularly around skilled workers. So our government has set up policies, in particular for students, things like the postgraduate work permit, which really bridge is to permanent residency. You have the ability to become a Canadian resident by coming in and staying in Canada in really in a 6-year time frame. And this is sort of a heavy economic policy in the government. So I think that's the first thing. I think the other thing is, Canada as a destination is a multicultural environment. And, I can speak from personal experience. I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old daughter. And the fact that they learn in school about different cultures and celebrate different cultural events and different cultures with their friends is unbelievable. So you can come to Canada and still be able to practice those cultural traditions and your religion, and that's phenomenal. So I think the multicultural aspect. And I also think Canada is a country. The way, you look at the way that we have handled COVID, the policies, the government support that has been available, and that has been quick. So I think for those three reasons, I think, it's becoming an increasingly a strong destination for international students. But it really comes down to, and so link it back to the MBA, as you think about where you want to do your MBA, a big part you have to think about is having that option to live in that country after you finish the MBA, because you're going to develop a network. And I think that's incredibly important as you think. And so as Canada is becoming that destination where people want to immigrate to, it is natural that MBA programs and other educational programs become a means to do that.
That's very interesting, JD. And yep, I think the immigration possibilities that open up after studying in Canada, that is a major attraction factor. And of course, how the government is structuring the employment opportunities and how the economy is growing, that is surely going to be of interest to the audience. Coming to the program structures, right? So countries generally either have a 1-year MBA program or a 2-year format. Canada is unique in that sense that it also has your really good 1-year programs. It also has some really good 2-year programs. So Daniel, Rotman's is a 2-year program. Can you help us understand how the program is structured? What are the key highlights that set it apart?
Sure. So there are benefits to both both 1-year and 2-year programs. And potential applicants should really think hard about what it is that they want personally from their MBA, both in terms of the experience in the classroom and their own career development and post-MBA career outcomes. Our 2-year program is distinctly different from a 1-year program because of the obvious time component. Our program is 16 months of academic study with a 4-month paid internship. We do like to highlight the 16-month academic study part of the program because frequently I say 2-year MBA, and I personally think to myself, oh my gosh, that means 24 months out of the workforce and 24 months in a classroom. It's not, it's 16 months and then the 4-month paid internship. The 2-year MBA does allow, for lack of a better term, the quote unquote luxury of time, in the sense that you can develop other areas of your profile when on campus. So your first year at Rotman is very prescriptive in nature and is very much a foundational year. Whereas in second year, you have the opportunity to enhance your generalist perspective by choosing any combination of 12 elective courses, or you can, by continuing on into a general MBA, or you can choose to specialize in any of our 15 areas of interest. Also in second year, there's opportunities for international exchanges, really delving deep into leadership positions and clubs, student organizations, etc. But those are really the key highlights that make the 2-year program a little bit unique from the 1-year program.
Oh.
I think you're on mute.
No sound.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, some issue over there. Okay, I'm back. So what I was saying is that the 2-year format also opens up really exciting internship opportunities, and Rotman has a flexible internship program. Can you tell us more about that? How does this impact the curriculum delivery and career opportunities for your students?
Sure. So the flexible internship program is just that. It is flexible. You can take it in any one of 3 work terms in your second year at Rotman. The internship is really a great opportunity, especially for career changers and for international students. So for career changers, whether they're looking for a change in industry, job function, or both, the internship allows them the opportunity to test drive that new role without necessarily making a huge commitment to a full-time role after graduation to see if it's the right fit. For international students, whether they're career changers or continuing on in their current career path, the internship does give them exposure to recruiters in the Greater Toronto Area. It allows them to build their network and really establish themselves as young professionals in the Greater Toronto Area by working on that network. So there are a lot of different opportunities. The other thing I do point out to my international students frequently is that the paid internship pays pretty well. So it does help to get that little injection of cash flow midway through a 2-year program, because it is obviously a big investment of time and resources. So the internship gets you back into the groove of working and does take off a bit of the financial pressure, because they are, generally speaking, quite well remunerated.
So that's very attractive and very interesting. JD, Ivy's is a 1-year format, and that so leaving no scope for an internship. So while it's attractive from an opportunity cost point of view, how does the school support career transitions?
Yeah, maybe I'll start by just explaining why we went to a 1-year format, because that provides some history around it. So about 15 years ago, we transitioned from a 2-year program to a 1-year program. And really where that came from was actually feedback from recruiters. And so all business schools will kind of focus on getting feedback from recruiters. And I mean, that's important. That's important for, if you get good talent in, you give them a great education, they get great, the recruiters are happy, they get recruited in organizations, they become happy alumni. That's sort of so when you think about business schools, a big key stakeholder is the recruiters. So a 1-year program, when we went from a 2-year program to a 1-year program, we actually cut our class size in half. So our class size was about 300 with 4 sections. We're now at 150 with 2 sections. And we did that very purposely because a 2-year program, and it really depends, as Danielle talked about, what you want to get out of the experience, but what's your experience coming in as well. So, you know, when you look at it, is we want to make sure that we get individuals in our program that meet recruiter expectations where they may not need an internship. And so what we do is a couple of things. I think to highlight is one thing that we do is to make sure on the front end, when you're doing our admissions, is that a 1-year program fits with your career goals. And again, 91% of our class will make a career transition. And so in that regard, we involve our career management. So the people that coach the students are the sole people that do our admissions interviews. And the reason for that is we want to make sure early on, we want to help you with that decision, whether a 1-year program or a 2-year program is a good fit for you. We had a admissions committee meeting this morning, just before I got on this call. And one of the candidates we talked about is they're better off in a 2-year program right now. And we will have that conversation with them. And so the first thing is we do is make sure that it's upfront. So then I'll talk about the program itself. I think there are 2 things that are there. Career management provides a lot of support to get you up and running and get you ready, and really doing that exploration as soon as you're in the program. And a big part for international students is developing that network, right? And I will say this, that if you're an international student coming in doing an MBA program in Canada, never call yourself an international student. Never think of yourself as a disadvantage because you have great experiences. Call yourself a global MBA student, because that's really what you are coming into the country. But what we have to do is develop you that network in Canada right away. And so we do that. The case study methodology and the way we teach allows you, as you go through the program, not only that you're learning the concepts and frameworks, you're also learning about different industries. So naturally, by the way we teach, you're actually gaining experience. And then the other thing we do is we have a major project that we put in the fall. And that major project really is giving you an on-the-ground experience like an internship. So it's not an internship, but you're working with an actual organization on an actual problem, or you're doing a new venture as well. So that provides you that opportunity to apply some of your learning in a real setting. So I would encourage people, as they kind of think about a 1-year or a 2-year program, is, you know, think about the experience you want, but look at employment outcomes and data, because our employment outcomes and data are really strong. And also, and I know we'll talk about rankings later, is what are people saying about the career management, the support they received, and everything else. And again, so my last comment would be, never ever self-select yourself out, whether you want a 1-year program or a 2-year program. You know, we're here to help you in helping make that decision. So again, it fits certain people and certain scenarios, and also where, you know, what experience are people looking for, but also the experience level that people are coming into the program as well.
JD, that's very interesting. 91% career changers or transitioners. Yeah. That's really impressive, and possibly even higher than some of the 2-year programs. So really great job over there. Daniel, you have a location advantage. You're in the heart of downtown Toronto, and that must open up a lot of networking opportunities for your students. So can you tell us more about how Rotman facilitates that? What kind of industry exposure do students at Rotman get?
Sure. As I'm sure a lot of people tuning in right now already are aware, that Toronto is the 2nd largest financial center in North America after New York. So there is a lot of opportunity in a lot of the traditional roles that we think of when considering MBAs. So all the big banks are here in Toronto. We have head offices for management consulting. But the other opportunities are maybe not as evident to people from outside the city and outside the country. So there also is the University Health Network, which is just down the street from Toronto, from Rotman, the Mars Discovery District. There is a lot of opportunity in Toronto, and the vast majority of our students do secure their full-time roles post-MBA in the greater Toronto area, which we call the GTA, to help you guys with some of the lingo before potentially joining us here in Toronto. So the network, there is a very healthy and robust ecosystem of back and forth between Rotman and between a lot of these head offices and a lot of the recruiters in downtown Toronto. Our campus is about 15 minutes from Bay Street, which is our equivalent of Wall Street to New York or Fleet Street in London. I'm afraid that the big financial centers in India are not as familiar to me. I apologize for that, not having that comparison at the ready. But so a lot of our students will go down there for networking events. Something that we have traditionally had at Rotman, it might look a little different this year, given the circumstances, is speaker series on campus, which are, they occur, we have over 150 every year, traditionally. And these events bring in top thought leaders, authors, politicians, CEOs, etc. They come to campus, give a talk, and then there's a pseudo networking event after the fact. Something that I always encounter when giving tours of the school and welcoming students for our open house every year, which traditionally takes place in November, is the fact that we have lockers on campus that are very much front and center when walking the hallways of Rotman. This seems a bit odd for a graduate school, but the reason we have these lockers is because a lot of our students, the vast majority actually, they do keep business attire in these lockers because there is so much back and forth between being on campus for a couple classes and then traveling downtown in that 15-minute journey to go to a networking event. Our career service team is one of the largest in the nation, and they dedicate a lot of time to massaging and maintaining these relationships with big firms in Toronto, and then also the smaller, more boutique firms as well. So there is a lot of opportunity for our students, and it is constantly going on in Toronto because obviously the opportunities that are at our doorstep, but also that internship contributes to the momentum for full-time employment as well. So there's always things happening, always events for our students to take part in, and new relationships forming regularly.
Thanks, Daniel. That's very interesting. India's equivalent of Toronto would be the city of Mumbai, and especially the financial district of Bandra Kurla Complex, BKC. And I believe we do have a lot of attendees, a lot of people who have joined in are from Mumbai right now. And yeah, so if you are from Mumbai and you understand how the economy in Mumbai works, Toronto is on similar lines and hub of financial activity in North America. So very interesting location. JD, you are slightly away from Toronto. You are a good 3.5 hours drive away from Toronto in the city of London, Ontario. How's that location?
I'd say it's only 2 hours.
Yeah, it's about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
About 2 hours. Yeah. Okay, I come into Toronto once a week, so yeah, not now, not lately with COVID, but it's about 2 hours. So yeah, we're in London, Ontario, which is very much like a university town. So again, I think as you kind of think about location, you also want to think about what experience you're looking for as well. So we're in a university town. You know, I think one of the benefits of it is, and you know, I hear this from students, and I did my undergraduate in a school at Queen's University, which is also in a university town, is that it's very much an immersive experience. So one of the things that's interesting for international students is when you come to London, you're no different than domestic students because everyone comes there to study, right? So everyone's coming there to go to school. So you're no different other than, you know, and so all the students live near each other. So you have that benefits of that sort of tight-knit community. And they live near each other. They probably live within a 10-minute sort of radius around it. So then I'll flip and talk about how the networking happens. So the first thing I will talk about, when you're talking about large organizations that do on-campus recruitment. So these are all the financial organizations, the consulting firms, you know, Microsoft, any of the big firms. And we have about 250 of these firms visit campus. They will come where the talent is. Doesn't matter where you're located. And that's not anything unique to that's, you know, they will go to where the talent is. And that's part of their job, is to source talent. So they will come. But a big part of what you're doing is you're networking after that, right? And getting to know people and everything else. So how we facilitate that is we allow time in our schedule for the students to make trips to Toronto. I would say I used to live in London, then lived in Toronto, moved back to London. And I would say what happens in my own network and what we coach the students is when you go to Toronto, make sure that you use your time well. So you become a much more strategic networker because it's not as easy. right? To say, well, I'll pop down and have coffee with you at 3 o'clock. I'm coming in on the Friday. So you get really, really good at sort of the diligence around the networking. The other thing I'd encourage candidates to think about is not only is it about network as part of location, but it's also about access to network. So, that is really important as well, is you want to make sure that that network is rich, and the network is, the school's brand power, but also the alumni network. So one of the things we're really proud of is that we are ranked by Business Week. They do a ranking of networking, and they actually go out and ask people that just completed the program and alumni about networking opportunities when they were in the program. And if you take about 130 schools in Business Week, our score for networking is in the top 15 globally. So what that shows is location is not making an issue, but our access to the network is unbelievable. The last point I would end with is it's going to be interesting to see how networking changes with COVID. And I think my own comment will be, I think that location will become way less important. And I'll use myself as an example. I never thought about networking virtually, right? Never thought about getting on a Zoom call and networking virtually. Now we're all pros at it because we had to pick it up quickly. So what's interesting about our class that started in March is their access to alumni and access to network has increased exponentially. And a big part of that is because people now don't have to realize I have to leave my office or go visit you. I can jump on a Zoom call. And I do think that's going to change. I think people are much more comfortable networking virtually. So the supports that are going to be there for all of the students on not only how to teach you to network, it's also how to teach you to network virtually is going to be important as well.
That's very interesting. And would it be fair to compare, say, Toronto with New York and Boston with London, Ontario? Would it be similar?
Yeah,
Of course, a lot of our audience.
I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so those of you who are not very familiar with the locations in Canada, you can take Boston and New York as standbys. So New York would be like Toronto, and Boston being a university city. London is very, very similar to that. So yeah, very, very interesting over there. And let's now deep dive into the right kind of profiles who apply to you and what fits with each of your cohorts. So over the years, we have seen a tremendous increase in popularity of Canada as a destination. And this is visible from the GMAT score reports that are sent to schools in Canada. And we have, of course, worked with a lot of candidates who have chosen a Rotman MBA or an Ivey MBA or even the Masters in Management programs or other popular programs in the United States or elsewhere in Europe. Clearly, you have a tough job to pick the right candidates from the hundreds of Indian applicants. So Daniel, starting with you, who's the right Rotman candidate? What do you look for? Or are there any specific traits that you look for in a candidate who receives an interview invite at Rotman?
That's a great question. It's a question we get a lot. I'm speaking for myself and probably JD as well. So I could speak about this for an hour. There are a lot of different things that we look at, but at the end of the day, the thing that we're looking for is someone who has high potential for academic success and high potential for professional success, and who is a well-rounded individual who's going to reinforce the Rotman brand, both on campus and once they've graduated. So speaking about Indian applicants specifically, your scores coming from India are always fantastic. They're really excellent. Academics are usually quite strong with the Indian cohort every year. So just hitting those academic marks is not going to be enough, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. When I take a look at my portfolio every year, I am looking for people who have the right aptitude, obviously, the right experience, but really the right attitude can get you a long way in going through the application process. Every week I will have a discussion with a candidate saying you need to trust the process. We've spent a lot of time working on different methodologies and ways of assessing candidates to ensure that we are getting being able to look at the big picture. We do indeed take a holistic approach to admissions. Every year there will be someone with a 760 GMAT who doesn't even get an interview at Rotman. So that is proof that we do take a holistic approach. The traits that we are looking for, in addition to what I said about attitude, aptitude, and experience, getting to that interview is a difficult thing, but we allow you to present yourself in a few different ways in the application. So without droning on for too long, we do use online spontaneous video question and answers to get a bit of an understanding about how you are able to compose yourself in a spontaneous environment, what your energy is like. That gives us a bit of an idea of your personality type, and how comfortable you are in your own skin. We love to read the essays, and I think you have a question a bit later for me on that, so I won't get into the specifics too much on that, but the essay does give you an opportunity to introduce yourself outside of the metrics of a GPA, a GMAT score, and your years of work experience, etc. Ultimately, I know that there are a lot of students who do want to gain entry into Rotman, who do want to gain entry into Ivey. As JD said earlier, they encountered a candidate this morning that really would probably be better suited for a 2-year MBA. If you aren't admitted to Rotman, that might be a small blessing in disguise. We are looking for people who are going to be the right fit for Rotman, but we also conversely want to make sure that we're the right fit for them. So it really is about matchmaking, finding the best compatibility between programs and students, and also the right timing. So just as I finish, there are many students every year who are waitlisted and taken off the wait list a few months later and offered admission into the program. And there are students every year who have 1, sometimes 2 refused applications, and then they gain entry in subsequent years because they've taken some of the feedback we've given them or improved their profile in some way that it does become a better fit for Rotman.
So that's very interesting. Coincidentally, Indian matchmaking is a show which is trending on Netflix.
Yes. I watched it last night. Maybe that came out.
Oh, you did? Oh, it's been trending in India quite a bit, but surely not a true reflection of India. But very, very interesting that we talk about matchmaking over here. Katie, in your case, you said about your rejecting candidates because they are not a good fit with a 1-year program. So you're clearly looking for something which is different than what Rotman or say a Schulich is looking for in a candidate. So how do you evaluate your applicants?
I think on the broader end, we're looking for the same, right? Which is the academic side of things, and also, contribution to the community. I think every school is looking for that same. There might be nuances in sort of the differences. I will start by saying this. The first point I want to mention is, I think it's really important that people never ever self-select themselves out of a program or never self-select themselves out of an MBA because they think, oh, I'm not a typical candidate. There is no typical candidate. And all of the programs are really looking for tomorrow's leaders, right? And leaders come from different backgrounds. And now I'll talk specifically about Ivey. And I'll talk about it in the way of how can candidates differentiate themselves? I think that's the important part because you're right. You see lots of applicants. You see a lot with similar GMAT scores. And then how do applicants differentiate themselves? I think the first thing is having a real thought out about, and this is especially important to us in a 1-year program, really well thought out why an MBA and why Ivey fit with your career goals, right? It doesn't mean that we're going to, you say you wanted this and you're in the program. Lots of people change their mind as they get in and they learn about industries. That's okay. But it has to be well thought out why an MBA. And that means doing research on the program, right? Talking to alumni, talking to students, listening to webinars, all of that allows you to do the research on it. The second thing is that switching your mindset. So this is going to be advice as you think about looking at an MBA program, is switching your mindset, not as much what you do in your job, but switching it to talk about the impact and accomplishments I've had. So the how behind your job. And that's probably the biggest thing that people make a mistake is they talk about, here's my job description. I'm responsible for this. And, I'll give an example of a recent call I had with a candidate to get them thinking about that. But think about, what are those accomplishments you're most proud of? What is that impact that you made? Where you had to take initiative, where you had to work with, solve problems, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll give you an example of how to think about things. I was talking to a candidate and I said, well, do you make decisions in your role? They said, no, I'm not really in a role of making decisions. So I said, do you make recommendations? I said, all the time. Well, do they act on your recommendations? Yeah, all the time. Then you make decisions. And so you have to start thinking, it's much easier for us to talk about what we do in our job. That's a much more natural thing. It's much more difficult for people to talk about the impact and accomplishments they had. And that's really, when it comes down to it, the depth of your accomplishments, the breadth of your accomplishments, and the impacts that you had is where you can differentiate yourself as a candidate. But it takes you thinking about your experience in a very different way.
Okay. That's very interesting. And both of you did mention about essays playing a very important role. That is something which is really scary for a majority of Indian applicants who are not used to writing really long, open-ended essays as part of their previous education. So let's deep dive a little bit more on that, because that clearly is a very important area. And Daniel, in Rotman's case, you have a 1,000-word essay on the spike factor. And very difficult for a candidate to identify the right spike factor, what to position, what fits with the school and the career aspirations. So can you share some tips for Rotman aspirants? Any interesting examples of spike factors that you've seen in the recent past?
Yeah, so spike factor, it's not just for Indian applicants. We have applicants all over the world who just want a little more clarity on what spike factor is. The first thing I always start with is getting back to reality television for some reason. It is kind of like the X factor, which is a little more common in English language, at least, to explain what we're looking for. So effectively, spike factor is anything that makes you unique. And so how we want to learn about that uniqueness is via the 1,000-word essay. What we usually tell candidates is we want to hear about any situation, accomplishment, perhaps hobby, maybe adversity you've overcome in your life that's required grit, passion, resilience, perseverance, or goal setting. This year, we're asking how those experiences will, how they've shaped you and how they have an impact, or how they will help you rather contribute to Rotman's values. We are looking for something creative, something a little outside the box, which, depending on the education system you've gone through formally, might, as you mentioned, be a little intimidating. Effectively, I have had this conversation with Indian candidates many times. It's almost like an icebreaker within the format of an essay. So what are you passionate about? What motivates you? What could you talk about all evening? What might you talk about on a first date? All these kinds of conversations that make you unique and bring something new to the table. In terms of examples of spike factors that we've seen it all, from Olympic gold medalists to individuals who found a stray dog living in the alley in between their home and brought it in and cared for it and spent a lot of time and effort nursing another being back to health and all the things that it taught them. You don't need to be an Olympic gold medalist to write a really good spike factor essay. Some people are too busy maintaining an A+ average, getting 700+ on their GMAT, caring for family members and climbing up the corporate ladder, that they don't have time to have a spectacular spike factor. We just want to hear about your life experiences to date, how they've shaped you, and how those experiences are going to help you contribute at Rotman and beyond. The final thing I'll say about the spike factor essay before I wrap up is it is providing students, rather applicants, with an additional area to include new information. So I do caution applicants from talking about work or academics in the spike factor essay. Be strategic. We're giving you a whole new platform to express yourself and to kind of round off all the edges of your application. So to repeat what we can already glean from your transcript, your GMAT, or your CV would not be a good use of that opportunity. So try to find something new to introduce when we're giving you that chance to do so in the essay.
That's very interesting. And I personally was intimidated, looking at the topic, but I have a stray dog at home, so I'm good to go over there. So it really works for me. Yep, great. So, very interesting. JD, yours is a more traditional application in that sense. You have a career goals essay, which is the SOP, and then you have a interesting essay prompt. You're talking about an important issue on which the candidate would have changed his or her mind. What is the school trying to measure from that particular topic?
Yeah, I think overall the essays, and Danielle, you touched on that. It's about bringing narrative to your application, right? So you get all the things about where you work, your resume, your transcript, and so it's probably a part about getting a narrative of the individual. And again, learning about a situation that was, where they changed their mind on something that had an impact on them. And so it can be personal, it can be professional, but it's about, one of the journeys of doing an MBA is it's a journey of self-discovery. So you're going to change your thoughts about something. That's part of the power of it. You're going to, change the way that you look at things. And so it's about understanding, does that person have the professional maturity of having an experience on where they kind of change their mind on something? And so that's really where we have the essay. I have 2 tips about essays to pass on because it's questions we get all the time. So the first tip I have to pass on is that when you're writing the essay, many of us, and I'm not sure if this is the same for you, Danielle, when we read the essays, we read them as individuals in our admissions committee. And the best way that people can write the essays is write it like you're talking to an individual, because that's how we read them. And so, the word essay is sometimes when we think about school, it's like you're writing it for an audience, but also treat those essays like you're talking to an individual. That allows you to personalize them and to be authentic versus writing them to an audience. So that's the first tip. The second tip is that, they all have word limits, or in, video essays, they have time limits. And so people get stressed about the word limits and the time limits. Is treat it like a trailer to a movie, because I like to use analogies. So the movie, if you think about a trailer to the movie, a trailer is probably 3 to 4 minutes for a 2.5 hour movie. It's not meant to give the whole plot. It's meant to give the headlines. And so that's what you kind of want to do on the essays, is kind of treat them as the trailer and the movie as the interview. Because really what the essays do is they provide that sort of background to build on the interview. So that would be my tips around the essays. But definitely we get lots of questions from, around the globe, domestic students, international students, about the essays. So.
True. And you did touch upon the timed written and the video essays. So what about those who are camera shy? Anything for them to be scared about? You both use the Kira platform, right? So
Yeah.
Any suggestions or tips for that?
Do you want to go, Danielle, first, and then I can chime in?
Sure. So I'm sure that Ivey is the same, in that there are practice questions available to candidates. So always do the practice questions. Part of our job is to speak publicly and quickly establish rapport with individuals. I absolutely freeze when I have to do on camera, computer essay questions. It's just, I don't like it. I've never been good at it, even though I'm comfortable public speaking in front of hundreds of people. It's a very strange environment to try and establish a connection or a rapport staring into the abyss of a blank computer screen. So I have told candidates, if having a friend or a family member silently on the other side of your computer helps you, if you're especially camera shy, do it. Maybe even a mirror or whatever it is that's going to help you. It's absolutely fine. Also, at least for Rotman, the questions aren't skill testing. So relax about the content of the questions for Rotman, at least. I can't speak for Ivey, but they're going to be icebreaker type questions that you've probably encountered in one way, shape, or form previously in life, whether starting school or a new job. So again, don't put too much pressure on the content. Just try to relax and be yourself.
Yeah. I completely agree with Danielle. I think, so here's what I will do so ours aren't skill testing. They're very much the same. Icebreaker questions or, drawing something on your experience, but there's nothing in those questions to try to trip people up or to trick them. I think a lot of it comes down to mindset, and Danielle talked about that. I think we're not looking for perfection because we're asking you to think on your feet. And so we're not looking for perfection. So nerves are normal. And I would say there's no right or wrong answer. So don't focus on the wrong or I think am I giving the right answer? There's no wrong or right answer. Be yourself. You know your experience the most, and go in with that attitude. Go in with an attitude of nerves are normal. We're asking you to think on your feet. So we're not looking for perfection. And the other thing is there's no right or wrong answer in what you deliver. And you know your experience better than anybody else. They teach you when you do interview training. I know you work with a lot of candidates. It's like you don't have time to overthink it, right? So sometimes you got to go with that first thing that comes into your mind, right? And block out all of it. Even if you get partway through 30 seconds in and you're like, oh man, I just thought of a better example. Just go with that one that came first in your mind.
So that's very fair. I'm just going to add on one point over here to the, of course, to our audience is dress for the occasion. So don't take it very casually. While you don't need to be suited up for it, but do dress formally or at least professionally for that. Again, be careful with your words over there. So don't, of course, you're not under stress to be extremely perfect over there, but don't be too casual either. So don't use words like, hey, hi, and something very casual over there. Be professional and come across professional. It creates an impression as well. Great. So I think we have captured quite a few things about the programs, about the application process. But these are challenging times. These are very complicated times for the schools, for the applicants, and for us as well. And that's mainly because of COVID. And COVID-19 has really changed how we evaluate or do things as well. One impact has been on the GMAT test taking as well. So, GMAT, while now in-center testing has started opening up in India, it's still very difficult to get a slot. And most of the applicants or aspirants this year would be taking their GMAT online. And this comes without the AWA score. So Daniel, JD, are you looking at these scores any differently than the regular GMAT? Any disadvantage if a candidate is applying through an online GMAT? And any possibility of a candidate getting a GMAT waiver because of COVID?
Yeah, do you want to go, Danielle, or I can go?
I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll talk about the waiver. We're not providing any waivers unless it's a CFA. And I think Rotman's in the same boat. If you have a CFA, we still require, if you don't have a CFA, everyone's required to write the GMAT or the GRE. I would say the online test, and we kept in regular touch with GMAC all the way through it. The online test, they've been very good at sort of adapting around it. So if people remember at first, if you read any discussion boards or anything like that, they had a online whiteboard that just wasn't working. Now they are allowing a whiteboard. They're allowing a retests. They've extended it now to the end of December. So they've done, I would say, a very admirable job of making sure that's accessible and also making sure that it is comparable to the in-person GMAT. I would say, as you know, back to your question about the AWA versus there's no disadvantage in doing it. Is what we're doing is putting more emphasis on the verbal score, right? Because we don't have the AWA to go over. And it's also using other things where we test communication, particularly around the admissions interview. So again, no disadvantage. I would suspect our program starts in March. We will have the majority of our applicants coming in with an online or virtual test format than even in the in-person one. So.
Yeah, so very similar with Rotman. We are not offering waivers unless, of course, you've completed all 3 levels of the CFA. The way that online tests are being compared to in-person tests, we actually have a scorecard, which some applicants today have probably heard me speak about on different occasions. And there's actually a mathematical breakdown, and that's just been adjusted to ensure that the online test is treated exactly the same as tests that have been done in person. So we're finding that some of our applicants have tests that are a year or two old, which we'll still accept, that were done in person, and they're opting to use these instead of rewriting with an online test. These applicants will be assessed using the exact same criteria as applicants submitting an online GMAT. So it absolutely was paramount to us to ensure that, and as I'm sure it was with Ivey, to ensure that students weren't suffering anymore and applicants weren't having any more challenges than they already are in the current circumstances. So to really ensure that everyone's being treated equally and there's a fair playing field in terms of our assessment of their capabilities.
Great. So, by the way, to our audience, so if you're a CFA charter holder, then all top 3 schools in Canada, that's in no particular order, Ivey, Rotman, Schulich, all 3 of them give you a GMAT waiver if you're a CFA charter holder. So if you are a CFA charter holder looking for great opportunities in finance, Toronto, Canada, it's a great hub for such opportunities, and you can do so without even taking the GMAT. So yeah, one interesting option over there. I'm going to continue a little bit on the COVID impact on the program and program delivery. And there was a disruption, right? All the schools faced this. And suddenly, within a span of, say, a week's notice or 2 weeks' notice, all your programs had to go online from being in class. So any major plans or changes that are going to continue in the future in the 2021 intake? JD, you also have an intake in March 2021. So any major changes planned for that? And are you still accepting applications for the March 2021 intake?
Yeah, so I'll go first. Maybe I'll talk about where our class is that started in March 2020. So
Sure.
Our class started in March of 2020. They were in person for about 3 weeks and then had to transition virtually. So they have been virtual. I'm happy to announce as of August 10th, they will be back in a live classroom format. They will be socially distanced, but they will be back on Monday into a live classroom environment. So they're excited. I think over that last time, I think I speak for all schools, no different, and all programs, doesn't matter what it is the transition at first was pretty quick, right? Like COVID kind of hit and it was sort of, we're closed, we're going back, we're going to take a week and then a week later we'll be virtual. I don't think any of us expected this to last into August. So it was sort of one of those things. So I think we've gotten way better at the virtual learning, right? As we've learned. And I think on both sides, students become adaptable, the faculty do. I think a testament, we offered all of our students in March that opportunity to actually defer the program, right? You're welcome to defer the program. We only had 3 that did so. And one was actually a frontline healthcare worker. It was actually a nurse and felt responsible to go back and work within the healthcare environment. So I think that's a testament to, it's not optimal, but I think everyone kind of pitched in to make it work. We are expecting for our class in March of 2021 to be in person, but with this virus, it's so unpredictable. So our kind of commitment to candidates is to keep them up to date on what the plans are, and also to provide options as we move forward, however that looks. I would say what things have been differences in the programs. I think the silver lining with this whole situation is it allowed you to kind of do things that you didn't know, forced you to kind of be innovative and to look at different things. And so there'll be some things that we had put into our program because of COVID that actually was turned out to be, hey, when this is all over, or even in a normal programming or a normal steady state, we're continuing to do it because it's going to be great. So I think networking opportunities that we did, particularly around, large employer events, is very much, we do a large employer event that's very Toronto specific. And it was all in person, and have that ability to bring people across Canada or even employers internationally and connect with students will be great. We did this thing called the Ivey Teachable Moments, and it was really designed for senior leaders to come in. And so each week we have a CEO come in and talk about what they're doing around COVID. And, and then it talks about sort of their leadership and their adaptability. We will keep that going. And what's fantastic is no matter where those people are, they can kind of zoom in. And so we had last week we had the president of Air Canada talking about what's happening in the airline industry, and there he is dialing in from his kitchen table at home. We had one of our alumni who's the chair of Revlon talking about the impact of COVID on the cosmetic industry, and he's in his house in Florida. And so those things, again, back to the networking, I think the programming can enhance, and it's also faculty getting used to some of that technology that can be brought into the classroom. So I think that, there's been some great things that have happened from COVID where you go, even in a normal state, I'm going to integrate this into the curriculum. And I think that's very positive in that way. I mean, even recruitment events, I will say, and I'm sure, Danielle, it's the same for you. It's like recruitment events, like MBA fairs, you had to go in person, right? And be in the location. And, we've done mock classes where we've done online and had people join from all over the world. And so it's fantastic that we can have that. So.
Fantastic. Daniel, how about Rotman? So your cohort, your 2020 class would have been at the verge of completing the program. And the last few weeks would have suddenly gone online. I know you did your graduation ceremony online as well. So how was the entire experience over there?
Yeah, so I'm not going to repeat everything that JD said, but it's been an interesting period of time. I think incoming students who are considering applications now, it's very difficult to advise them because for us, we're a cohort program, and as people considering applying now, they're talking about joining us in August of 2021. So I don't know what that's going to look like. I wish I had a crystal ball. I think I could use that to my advantage economically if I did know exactly what August 2021 was going to look like. So for that, unfortunately, we're just going to have to wait and see. For our incoming class this fall, we are doing a first term is going to be online. And that has been a decision that has been guided by University of Toronto, City of Toronto, and then of course at a provincial and federal level. We have a very large class every year of 295 students. So getting students on campus and social distancing, and with about 50% of our class every year being international, online was the way to go for first term. So again, trying to keep things as fair as possible, rather than having domestic students on campus in the fall and our international students waiting for their documents to come through, not able to travel. IRCC changing a few guidelines recently. Everyone's going to be online for the first term, and then second term will be a hybrid as it stands now. As we all know, this is probably going to be subject to change, potentially be subject to change depending on what happens in the next couple of weeks and months. But for students considering applications now, the earliest they would need to be in Toronto would be mid-August 2021. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of advice we can give them other than hopeful advice, or advice based with a little bit of evidence on what's happened thus far with the scope of the pandemic.
Hopefully we would have a vaccine out by beginning of next year and things may go back to the new normal by August, September next year. But any advice for aspirants who have been impacted by COVID? So there have been layoffs, even Indian applicants have been impacted by layoffs in various companies. So any advice to applicants or aspirants who have been specifically impacted by COVID, possibly don't have a full-time job right now, what can they do to make a case for themselves to an MBA program like yours?
Is this to me?
Either of you, whoever wants to take this.
Okay. We're going to be very understanding, as I'm sure Ivy will be as well. This is a once in a lifetime, hopefully, scenario for a lot of people. Layoffs due to COVID are unfortunately going to be out of potential candidates' control. So we aren't looking at applicants who have been laid off in a negative light, because there have just been such massive cutbacks, furloughs, and layoffs across the board. It is always nice to see that students are keeping themselves busy otherwise. So if you have been laid off, what have you been doing with this time? Are you maybe engaged in something online that you're doing, or how have you been filling this void of no longer having regular work? But yeah, we've definitely discussed students who have been impacted by COVID, and we're going to take an approach that's as understanding as possible because so many industries have been impacted.
Yeah, I think Danielle's right, is that, the key to this is we've got to be flexible, be understanding. And I'm sure we're no different than, I think, any business or anything else. It's really looking at your various stakeholders and saying, how can we be flexible around it, right? And I think that's really important. I think too is, so I've been at this for a long time, so this would be the third recession sort of time that I've been through, and it is a perfect time to go back to school. And I think as you kind of think about whether, there's two ways people can be impacted. One could be, my industry is completely disrupted and may not be coming back, right? That's the way you kind of have to think about it and say, now I've got to kind of reinvent myself. And a perfect way to do that is to think about going back to school. The other aspect is this could be a short-term thing, and things could be coming back to normal. But what you tend to see in MBA programs is, as soon as there's a recession, there's an interest in people coming back to school. I mean, it's just natural. Take COVID out of it. If we were in a recession, we would see it. I think the issue with COVID compounds the complexity of it, because we're unable to say, what will that program look like in March? What will it look like in September? Because of the unpredictable nature in this. I mean, I can even use my own naivety in the start of this was, this will be a week-to-week thing. Now it's a month-to-month thing, right? And so I think on that way, being flexible around it, but also being very transparent about where we are, right? And what our plans are, and providing students options if those plans, aren't fitting with them.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, JD, for that. At this point, I'm going to open this up for audience questions. So if you have any questions for JD, Daniel, post them in the chat box in the comment section right now, and I'll take up a few of those. We don't have much time, unfortunately. We are going to go over time and probably utilize another 10 to 15 minutes. I hope that's all right with the two of you.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Great. So one question which I saw coming from Atul was about candidates with higher experience. So if there's someone with, say, 8+ or 10+ years of experience applying to your program, do you accept such candidates? What percentage of the cohort of your respective cohorts would be with more than 10 years of work experience? Any guidance for such applicants? Do
you want to go, Danielle, and then I can
Sure.
I think, yeah.
So for Rotman, my advice is going to differ a little bit from Ivey's, because we have an internship that is compulsory as part of our program. The more senior applicants become, the less competitive they're going to be to gain entry into the program. So more is not always better. Once students get around 8 years work experience, we do look at it a little bit differently with Indian students, because the bachelor degrees programs are usually 3 years. So they tend to have a little bit more work experience. But once you get around the 8-year mark, you're kind of becoming more attractive for a more senior MBA program, or an MBA program that doesn't have an internship component. So individuals with 8+ work experience, definitely 10 years work experience, are potentially going to face challenges in securing an internship because of the nature of internships. So if you're teetering around that, I would definitely request a pre-application chat, and that would be with me. And always take a look at the class profile to get an idea of where you fall within the averages on the class. Again, they're averages, so they're not hard and fast rules. We have students every year who come into the program with 10, 11, sometimes 12 years work experience. It's just not the norm. The norm is usually between 4 and 6 years work ex. So that is kind of the sweet spot for being experienced enough to come into the MBA and make the most of the opportunities made available to you, but not so experienced that it's then a challenge to secure an internship, which is where my advice is probably going to differ from JD's.
Yeah, we're very similar. I would say, our range is 2 to 10 years. Our average comes in around that. Most of the candidates come in sort of 4 to 6 years. The average is just a little bit over 5. MBA programs, for that reason is you want to make sure that you attract candidates, because it's cohort based, where they're at a similar stage in their career. Especially us being a case discussion program where people are sharing experiences and stuff, you want to make sure that it's similar to the stage of career, but also to meet recruiter expectations. And quite frankly, as you get on the older spectrum, and I'm talking more than 10 years, then, very similar to what Danielle talked about in internships, it's also about meeting recruiter expectations when you finish the program as well. So you're going to find, as you look at different programs, that they're really designed for, what stage are you at in your career? And so you're going to find most programs, and Danielle, I'm sure you can concur, we're on a lot of, this is a question that comes up in a lot of panels that we're part of. That's a pretty consistent thing when you're looking at full-time MBA programs in Canada, is that, once you get to that 10-year mark, it's going to be challenging for the program to be a fit with your profile moving forward. So.
All right. So on the other side, what about applicants with really low work ex? So you require a minimum 2 years, but if, let's say, an Indian applicant has a 3-year undergraduate degree, then does that become a minimum 3 years for your program, or does that still remain 2 years?
It's 2 years. Once you've obtained a bachelor's degree, 2 years from your date of graduation to your date of matriculation.
Yeah. Same with us. I think, I always coach candidates, it's not as much about the years, it's what you've done in it. So we decline people with 10 years of experience, and we accept people between 2 and 3 years, right? It really depends on what you've done in that time frame, and going back to the impact and accomplishments we talked about. So
fair. What about low GPA? What about low undergrad scores? How does one compensate for those?
I can take that.
Sure.
I don't think we're different than Rotman or any other school is. We don't have a minimum GPA to apply to our program. So I'm going to be personal, give you my personal experience. I would never have gotten to Ivey if we had a cutoff, because my GPA was horrible. So, I was young. I didn't really like what I was studying. But you have to compensate by writing a strong GMAT. So more emphasis goes on the GMAT if you have weak undergraduate grades. So that's really the way, you're looking for evidence of academic capability. And, if you have poor undergraduate grades, there's going to be much more emphasis on the GMAT. So that's, it doesn't negate you from applying. It's just you're going to have to put more emphasis on the GMAT.
Yeah, it's similar for Rotman, although if your GPA, we look at your final year of undergrad.
Same here.
If that GPA is a 3.0, that's fine. Anything under a 3.0, it's going to be a challenge to obtain admission into the program. So you really you're really going to have to be outstanding in all the other areas of your application, because whilst it's not an absolute, generally speaking, GPAs under a 3.0 are not successful in applications to Rotman.
All right. That's insightful. And now I'm going to take a very tricky question, and this must come up very often. So Financial Times rankings are very popular amongst Indian aspirants. Of course, there are a lot of other prestigious rankings as well, but for some reason, FT rankings do dominate the psyche of Indian aspirants. And Canadian business schools have seen a fair drop over the last decade. So if I remember correctly, around 2010, 2011, both of your programs used to be in top 50, and now there's been a steep fall over there. What's changed? What would you attribute this drop to? Has something impacted the quality? Has something impacted the career prospects? Or is it just how the rankings are structured?
So good. I can tackle that. I think there's two aspects. I think one is, if you look on the historical rankings, Rankings from China and Asia have really gone up in the rankings. They were never showing, and now they're showing there. So that, there's more competition amongst the rankings. The big thing that hurts us is a large percentage of that is based on salary increase, but they don't do that on sort of they use a thing called purchasing power parity, right? So all Canadian schools, a big reason why people are coming to Canada to study for MBA is they actually want to stay in Canada and work. And that actually hurts us with the purchasing power parity. So what would help us on the rankings, which is the wrong thing to have happen, is, and I'll speak to Indian candidates, if an Indian candidate comes to Canada and then they actually go back to India, our rankings would climb because of the purchasing power parity. But the large majority, Danielle, you're no different than us. The large majority, we're talking high 90%, end up staying in Canada to work. And so the whole salary component hurts it. So my advice to people around rankings, and we're proud of our overall rankings, but we counsel people not to look at the overall ranking, like number one in this or number one in Canada, is to look at the components of the rankings. So look at things like, what was their career progress, in relative to other schools that you were doing. I think the most valuable part of those rankings are actually survey data that these publications collect of people that experience the programs. So things like, how is networking opportunities? How is your educational experience? How is the service and support you receive from career management? That's the most valuable things that you can look at in rankings, because sometimes the rankings are really, at Financial Times, there's stuff that's outside of our control, and actually, that are really impacting those rankings. So hopefully that answers it. But it's I think rankings are incredibly important for people to look at, but the important part are those components of those rankings to look at. That are important to you in making the MBA decision.
So very true. And just to add some more perspective over here, for example, just Financial Times has 20% weightage on salary increase pre and post the program. So Indian Chinese applicants or schools over here, given the high inflation, see a much higher jump in the pre and post MBA salaries. It's also a factor of the undergraduate education system. Usually, the jobs that people get fresh out of undergrad education are not possibly at the same level as they are in North America or in Europe. And consequently, there's a significantly massive jump that happens during the MBA at a good MBA program. So that also results in the rankings getting skewed to some extent. And we at Edmund Square also realized this a couple of years ago, and we have been doing some research. In fact, we are coming out with our own rankings now. So we are trying to take the cultural context into account. You make rankings customized for Indian aspirants and come up with rankings which are more suitable to the situation and cultural aspirations of Indian aspirants. So we are trying to work on those as well. But thank you for the perspective over there. I know we are over time, but I can possibly take one or two more questions over here. And if you still have some questions, then you can surely post them in the chat box, in the comment section. I'll take those up. I have majorly covered the important ones, but one question about the IELTS score and IELTS or TOEFL score and requirements around that. So do you give waive off to international aspirants whose previous education has been in English, or what is the criteria to get that IELTS score waive off?
Yeah, for Ivey, they are waived from doing an English language requirement if they have more than 2 years either work experience or education experience in an English language environment. So they detail that experience in our application process. So, yeah. Generally, for candidates in India, where they are, for the large majority, are exempt from the IELTS or TOEFL because large majority have education in English.
Yeah, it's the same for Rotman. So because the vast majority of Indian institutions teach exclusively in English, we don't require TOEFL or IELTS. Occasionally, for the purposes of study permits or visas, students do require an additional letter from us, just saying that it's been waived, but usually they just go ahead with their applications. We don't require either ESL test, and they're able to obtain their study permits quite easily.
Yeah. All right. So last 2-3 minutes, and JD, Daniel, if either of you want to communicate any message to your respective aspirants, anything that we have not covered in the session so far, any thing that you would want to tell them about your respective programs? Okay.
Yeah, I can go. I think just in general, I think the big thing I always stress is never self-select yourself out. And I think that's really important, whether it's an MBA or an MBA program. And I really think when you think about, this is a huge decision, right? And so I'm going to talk about it as, this is a massive decision. And especially for candidates that are looking to make Canada home, right? It's an overwhelming decision. And sometimes when we're overwhelmed with a decision, you know, I know if I look back on big decisions I've made, sometimes you default to the easiest one, right? You go, oh. And the easiest default you can do is, I don't want to do an MBA program, right? You don't have to think about quitting your job, think about moving to Canada. So I would say, as you think about this decision, never ever, you know, do that gut check of saying, am I taking an easy decision or am I doing the right one? And never ever self-select yourself out, right? I think that's really important. And you know, we work with a lot of candidates, same with Danielle, and one of the things, we're here to help you, right? And I think that's a key message.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing I would add to that, those are all really good points, is this is not meant to be a really intimidating, terrible, difficult process. Try to relax and again, trust in the process. Trust that not every school is going to be the right fit for you. So as a consequence, that doesn't necessarily make you the best fit for every school. Do your research, but don't put too much pressure on yourself. It's going to, if you're committed to the process, the right decision will come your way eventually. I know that sounds a little wishy-washy, but it's true. I'm sure Ivey as well, Rotman, we've taken a long time to really streamline the assessment process, make sure that talent is winning, make sure that we're finding those candidates who are the right fit for the school, and hopefully that the school is the right fit for them. So certainly take it seriously. Commit time and effort to your application. But I have so many candidates I speak to who have really stressed themselves out, and it's not meant to be a terribly stressful process. It's meant to be a learning experience and building on your own self-awareness, and hopefully you can gain a little bit of enjoyment going through the process.
Great. Thank you for those insights, and really helpful. I know I have not taken a lot of questions that are still coming in the comment section. We are unfortunately out of time. But to the audience, if you have more questions about the respective programs, do check out the websites. There are online brochures available. There are class profiles available, employment reports available. So check those out, do your research. If you have more queries about the respective programs, respective schools, reach out to the admissions team over there. And I'm sure you'll get a great response. You'll get some more insights and clarification over there. So please do that. I would want to take a minute to thank Daniel and JD for doing this session. As I said,
Thanks
this has been most insightful. No, been a great pleasure hosting this session. And I'm sure the audience can, I can speak on behalf of the audience over here. This has been super insightful, and a lot of them would now be looking at applying to your respective cohorts as we go forward. And hopefully some of them would make it to your cohorts as well. So thank you again for doing this session. As parting notes to the audience, e-GMAT, so this webinar is coming to you through e-GMAT, and e-GMAT keeps hosting a lot of other sessions on taking the GMAT, preparing you for that. So there's an upcoming session on critical reasoning, which is scheduled for coming Saturday. There's a session on algebra as well, which is scheduled for coming Sunday. So do attend those and get more help on your GMAT preparation. If you have any queries about applying to any of the programs that we spoke about today or anywhere else and want a free profile evaluation, you can write to us at AdmitSquare as well. The email address is info@admitsquare.com. You'll also see this coming into the comment section right now. So you can always send us an email and we'll do a free profile evaluation for you. And of course, for those of you who have dialed in from Asia or Middle East or this part of the world, have a good night, Shamba Khair, Shubh Ratri, and good day to the rest of you who are in Europe or North America. So thank you again, Daniel. Thank you, JD. Thank you for joining in. We had a great audience today, 250 at peak, and overall 300 plus attendees across the whole of session. And this is going to be on YouTube and Facebook channels of e-GMAT as well. And multiple thousands would watch this over the coming few weeks and months and benefit from this session. So thank you again for doing this. And both of you have a great day.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so much. You as
Thanks.
well.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.